Hey Floss Tube, welcome back. This is my 95th Floss Tube video, and I'm excited to share with you what I've been working on. But first of all, I want to welcome you. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I hope that you enjoy the things that I have to share with you. And if you are returning, thank you for coming back and watching my videos. I really appreciate it. It's been a great couple of weeks. We had a wonderful Thanksgiving with a small group of family. My daughter came up from Tucson and spent time with us. That was really nice. And we're just basically getting ready for Christmas. Things have really cooled down here. It's actually feels a little bit chilly to us, and that's kind of nice. It's nice to feel cold instead of hot for a little bit. So let's get started. Before we start, I just want to respond to some questions that were left on my channel since the last time I posted a video. So the first question I had is from Ginger, and she asked me if I could share some of my finished projects. And since it's December, all of our Christmas stuff has come out, and I thought that this was a good opportunity to share some of the stuff that I've stitched that is Christmas related. I've shown this before, but I always have new viewers, and so I'm sure that there are people who would love to see these again. The first one is this right here. This is The Spirit of Christmas by Lavender and Lace. I finished that one a couple of years ago. It was a really fun stitch. Not very complicated. The most complicated part is in the greenery that goes around Santa. But it is a really fun stitch, not a lot of confetti, and it was really enjoyable. This up here is a design by Stony Creek. This was one of the first pieces that I stitched. It's been like, I finished it like probably close to 20 years ago. This is actually the piece that made me decide that I wanted to cross stitch. This is a pattern that my wife had that I really liked. It's a picture of some skaters with a village in the background. It took me a couple of years to stitch. Partly at the time I was only working on one piece at a time, and I got really discouraged when I got to the houses that are back in there because they're stitched with one thread over two, and because there's not as much coverage, I started to see the darker threads showing through the fabric, the darker threads that I was securing through the back. So I had to figure out how to secure those threads so that they wouldn't show, and that took me a little while to get up the courage to actually finish working on that. But that is the first really big project that I stitched. This over here I stitched about 5 years ago. It's Santa's Fable and Fantasy. It's a picture of 5 Santas in different kinds of styles of clothing. There's the traditional Santa in the middle, and then there's like a Santa dressed as a wizard. There's a Santa dressed in red, white, and blue also on this end. That was a design that was published in Cross Stitch and Country Crafts in the early 90s, and that was really fun to stitch also. Of course, there's an alphabet. There's a lot of blending filament in there that makes it sparkle. It's really a nice piece. And then this is a piece that I stitched 5 or 6 years ago, about the same time that I stitched this. Well, I started it a very long time ago, but then I actually pulled it out and finished it about 5 or 6 years ago. This is called Merry Christmas from A to Z. It's a design by Deborah Lambian. It was published as a leaflet by Leisure Arts. And this one is also really fun. My wife really likes this one. It's kind of her style. It has a little design for each letter of the alphabet. And there's a lot of cool things in there. So this one was really fun to stitch. partly because you have just little teeny tiny designs. So I stitched one design at a time and did all the back stitching when I finished it. So it actually was kind of it was a really good piece to work on also. This is the first piece I finished when I really started cross stitching. There were like about 10 years when I didn't really cross stitch a whole lot. So this was the first time that I designed the first piece that I finished after my hiatus, so to speak. So Ginger, a couple of months ago, I did a slideshow at the end of one of my videos showing pictures of most of everything that I've ever stitched. You can check that out. I'll put a link to that down in the comments below if you want to see most of my finishes. I'll say that most of them are there, and you can see what else. They're not as cool as seeing the pictures. I mean, they're just pictures, but you can get a feel of what I've stitched over the years. So in my last video, I mentioned that I had reworked my spreadsheet a little bit, and Dan Debo Designs asked me if I was going to share that. Yes, I'll be glad to share it. I'm still kind of adding features and working out some of the kinks with the changes that I made. Once things kind of settle down and I like what I have, I'll be glad to share it with everybody, just like I have my previous spreadsheet. Also, Barbara asked me, she heard that I mentioned a spreadsheet that I used to predict my progress, and just a little bit of details about that. She asked for that. So I've been tracking the number of stitches that I stitch every time I stitch on different projects since 2016, and based on I've figured out a way, as I keep track of how much I stitch, I figured out a way to predict how much time is left based on how I stitch. It's just a little mathematical formula that I use, and as I said, I'll be glad to share the spreadsheet that I'm using right now to be able to do that, so that if you're interested, that you would want to do that as well. Kate asked me if I really do store all of my finishes in a box. Well, not all of them. You can see some of them have been framed. So, but I do have several projects that I haven't had framed yet. They will probably be framed eventually, but framing isn't a priority for me. I don't stitch to have something to hang on the wall necessarily. I stitch because I like to stitch. And so, yeah, I do have a lot of projects that need to be framed, but right now it's not really a priority for me. I don't really have, even if I were to frame everything, I wouldn't have a place to hang everything because I don't have enough wall space. So, I mean, it's easier to store them in a box all rolled up than it is to store a bunch of frame pieces under a bed somewhere. So. Anyway, that's kind of my view when it comes to framing. Linda asked me if I stitch with a magnifier lamp of any kind, and no, I do not. I am still, I guess, lucky enough, or I stitch with my glasses. I can't stitch, I'm wearing contacts right now, I can't stitch with contacts, partly because my eyes are getting so I can't see close up anymore, and the way my contact prescription is, it just doesn't work. But I do stitch with my glasses, with my progressive lenses, and those lenses help me to be able to see enough that I can stitch. So that is not really a concern for me. I am glad that I don't have to have a magnifier of any kind, and I hope that continues as long as possible. Stacy asked me, how do I count my stitches? And she would like to know some tips or tricks. So Stacy, I cheat. Basically, when I say stitches, I'm not talking about each individual stitch. I am if I'm stitching full coverage. But if I'm stitching a sampler, for example, that has a lot of empty space that's not stitched, I don't count the number of stitches that I've stitched. I count the 10 by 10 blocks. So really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about stitches is I'm talking about a 10 by 10 area in my chart. And what I do is I have an electronic copy of the chart. I mark it up as I go. Every night I X out all of the 10 by 10 blocks that I have stitched, and every night I use a different color of highlight so that I can easily see what I've stitched that night. And then at the end of the night I just count the number of blocks that I've stitched and multiply by 100, and that's the number of stitches that I record. There are times when there's like a partial block because most designs don't have 10 by 10 blocks on the edges. So I just count the number of stitches that are in that partial block. And that's all I do. I don't count 1 stitch, 2 stitch. No, I just say, okay, this is what I've stitched, and then I multiply by 10. If I'm doing full coverage, of course I stitch in the diagonal, and I end up stitching, instead of a 10 by 10 square, I end up stitching a 10 by 10 parallelogram. And so at the end of the night I just count how many parallelograms I stitch, basically. So that's how I do that, is I mark my chart, and at the end of the night I see what I've marked and use that to count the number of stitches. Nancy asked if I used Valdani Threads for my winter Quaker. Yes, I'm using the called for Valdani Threads. And Luann asked me, what is railroading? I mentioned railroading in my last video. And I am sure, Luann, that you can do a search on YouTube for railroading, and you can come up with some videos that talk about how to do that. But essentially what it is when you make a stitch, you lay your threads diagonally where you want that stitch to lay, and then when you put your needle down through the fabric, you put it between the two strands of floss that are laying down. The idea is if you get it to lay straight and stitch like that it will help hold those strands in place. It does usually, but sometimes I've still had things go a little bit of wonky on me, and that's why I don't railroad, is because I can't seem to keep those threads parallel, so I just do the best I can. And I don't think it adds time to how I stitch, and I don't think that the added time is worth the benefit for me. So anyway, so those are all of my questions, all the questions that I had. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what I have been working on. And I have 3 projects to show you. I'm really happy with my progress on these projects, and I'm really happy with what I've been able to do. So we'll talk about it. The first project that I worked on is this. This is Time and Season Sampler by Moira Blackburn. This was a design that my wife gave me for Christmas last year, and I started it last May, and I think I've had about 3 weeks worth of work on it. I'll show you a picture of what it looked like the last time you saw it. This is a really nice design. I really like it. The colors are really cool, and I really like the saying. It's from a verse in Ecclesiastes that's pretty well known. I'm stitching it on 40 count Mallow from Zweigart. It's a fabric that's I think it's a cotton linen blend. It's kind of a light brown color. And I'm stitching with the called for DMC, and I'm stitching with 1 strand, so 1 strand over 2. And this is what it looks like now. So the last time you saw it, I basically had this bottom done, and I had started working on this tree. So I finished the tree, and then there's all of these little trees here. There's a plant and a couple of animals and these birds with this crown. And then I also stitched the last part of the verse, to every purpose under heaven. Yeah, and I've really enjoyed working on this. This is really fun. I really love how it's turning out. I love these colors and the way they're all working together. Yeah, this tree is kind of a pain because it's so big, and I've got another tree over here that's exactly the same but mirror image that I'm going to need to stitch over here. So that'll be fun. But before I get to that, I think I'm going to stitch. There's these same 4 trees and everything's basically mirror image. So this needs to be stitched here, and then we'll start this tree and see how much I can. But that'll have to wait until the next time I pull this out. Okay, so this is, once again, Time and Season Sampler by Moira Blackburn. And like I say, it's really fun to work on this. I just love that design. Okay. So then, the next piece that I worked on was Winter Quakers, and I think I've mentioned before. This is kind of my focus piece. I'm stitching this out of rotation because it's the closest to being finished, and I want to get some finishes in. So this is Winter Quakers. This is a design by Rosewood Manor, and there are 4 designs, 1 for each season. I'm doing winter right now, and I plan on doing all 4 because I really like all 4. So I'll show you a picture of what this looked like the last time you saw it. I'm stitching this on Picture This Plus Dwarf. That's the called for fabric, and I'm stitching with the Valdani Threads, which is what the design calls for. The Valdani floss is a 3-strand floss, but when you stitch with it, you don't separate out the strands. You stitch with all 3 as it comes off of the little ball that it comes in. So this is stitched with 3 strands over 2, but the 3 strands are kind of like 1 because they're just wrapped around each other. So it makes it so that what I really like about it is those stitches, they stand really proud off of the fabric. That really seems to be the case with this. But this is what it looks like now. So basically I stitched these motifs over here, and so these 3 motifs, this little teeny motif, and then I'm working on this one. And of course, there's all the backstitch snowflakes all through here also that I stitched. So this is the largest motif. This is the second largest motif. You can see I'm about 3/4 of the way through. I just have 1 more corner to stitch, and a little bit more of this border that goes around it to stitch also than 3/4. So I probably a little bit less than 3/4 of the way through. This is really fun. I really like these purple stars and the way they look against everything else. But it's, like I say, it's really coming along well. I have this big motif to do, and then there's just, I'm actually getting really close to the bottom. This is the bottom of the design is like right through here. So after I finish this, there's only 2 or 3 more motifs to stitch. So So there we go. I'll give you a little bit closer look, just so you can see how this looks. I think what I like best about this design is these little splashes of red from the birds, and these, I think that really, well, I guess it's like the reds, this green, I really like this green, and I really like this purple, and those really deep, bright colors really contrast with the more muted colors like coming through here. So that is Winter Quakers by Rosewood Manor. And then the last piece that I've worked on, this has been kind of fun too. This is my second oldest WIP, A Saviour's Praise. I'm coming up on 2 years since I started this. It'll be 2 years, like in February next year, I think. So this is a design by Teresa Vanette of Shakespeare's Peddler. It's not a reproduction sampler, it's her original design, but it's designed to look like a reproduction sampler that was stitched by Emma Seabrook, who's a fictional person. So it's Teresa kind of channeling her inner 10-year-old girl, 10-year-old little girl. I'll put a picture of what it looked like the last time you saw it. And I am stitching this on 40 count Beach Brew by R&R. I'm stitching with called for anchor threads, and there's like 3 or 4 weeks colors as well. And I'm stitching 1 strand over 2. So, and this is, I'm really happy with my progress because I think I've gotten through the most dense part of the stitching. So this is what it looks like now. And what you'll see is this center section is really the densest part. And this basket doesn't look like much. There is a lot of stitching in this basket. The basket is larger than the house. So I guess you'd probably say this is the largest motif. When you last saw it, I'd only worked like about this much of the basket. So I've stitched all of this basket along with, there are initials through here and a couple of other motifs that I stitched just to fill in the area around the basket. And then I've started working on the words to Now Think We All Are God. I got the last line stitched last night. So this is what I've been working on this week. Like I say, I actually have finished another page. So I have 4 pages finished and 4 pages to go. But my spreadsheet says that I've got 5 weeks more work to do, but that doesn't feel quite right because this is all words right here, and the words will go a lot faster than this basket did, I think. So I think I've got less than 5 weeks. I think that things, so basically all I've got to stitch is the words to Now Think We All Are God. There's alphabet up here, that won't take long to stitch. And then there's this border that comes all the way around. So probably the border is going to be what is going to take the majority of my time to finish. I've mentioned this before, but when I saw this piece, it reminded me of a verse in Doctrine and Covenants. And I have replaced some of the words in the border with the words with that, that are in that verse. For example, this I changed to temperance. I don't even remember what it used to be. I changed this to virtue, and I changed this to knowledge. And I've got some work to do up here to try to fit in a couple of words. So that might be interesting. But I'll give you a little bit closer look so that you can see, for example, that basket with the plant, the vines that go everywhere, and a couple of birds. Yeah, this one's really fun, but it turned out it's a lot bigger than I thought it was. It's taken me a lot longer time to stitch than I originally thought it would, just because it's so big, and I didn't realize how big it was when I first started. But it feels like I'm heading towards the finish. I think I'm over the hump and going down towards the finish, so that's exciting. Okay, so that's what I've been working on, those 3 projects. And let's talk about what I'm going to work on this week. So I think I mentioned in my last video that I've divided my rotation into half. I have my 5 oldest projects, my 5 newest projects, and I'm working down through those lists. So Saviour's Praise is the second oldest of my oldest WIPs. So now I'm going to work on the second oldest of my newest WIPs. And this is a piece that I started in May. And it is Medieval Town Mandala by Chatelaine. So I'm excited to work on this because I really want to. I'm really excited to get out of the middle and get down to the buildings. I don't know if I'll be able to do that this week, but I'll get closer to that. And I'm stitching it on 32 count antique white Belfast linen, and I'm stitching with the silk that it calls for, and I think it's mostly 2 strands, except for where it's not. Like this week I've got butterflies to stitch that are stitched over one, so that'll be fun. So this is what it looks like now, and I'll show you. So I'm working. So basically, this is what it looks like now. I am working down this way and over towards this corner. You can see I started working on these plants here. So now I've got a couple of butterflies to stitch, and then there's a triangle, a blue triangle with blending filament in it. Sorry, not blending filament, petite treasure braid that goes right through here. And then we'll get to the border that goes around the garden. I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to do. This piece is a lot of kind of confetti-ish. It's a lot of stitch a few stitches and then move on to a different color is kind of the way it's working out. So it seems to take a longer time to stitch than some of the other things that I work on. But you can see I have all of this done. This is basically the center, and now I'm going out to the next ring that goes around. So that's what I am planning on stitching this week, and we'll see how much I'm able to stitch of this. So that is the Medieval Town Mandala by Chatelaine. So I'll just show you this one graph. This graph is my WIP status graph that I'm using. It's been kind of fun to see how this has changed. And really what you're looking for is how it's the 3 projects that I've worked on, how they've changed. And if I get this to work right, I will morph from the old graph to the new graph so that you can see the change. These 3 projects, I am closer. You can see, for example, the winter Quakers. I'm getting up to 70% with about 2 weeks left to stitch on it. The time and season sampler, I've also made progress on that. I think it says that I have got, another 6 weeks to work on. I'm not sure if that's the case, but we'll see how it really goes. And then the piece that I worked on this week, Saviour's Praise, you'll see that it's gone up a little bit, and my time's gone down to, it says I've got about 5 weeks to work on, which, as I said, feels a little bit long. I don't really think it's going to take that long, but who knows? Maybe it's right. We'll see. But this is kind of where we stand. I'm excited to see the bars going up. I'm really excited to see winter Quakers get closer and closer to being finished. So as time goes along, the bars should get taller, and the points in the line should drop down. So that's kind of cool. Anyway, so that's kind of where my status is. I mentioned I've been working through my spreadsheet. I've added a couple of features since the last time I talked to you, and I'm really happy with some of the stuff that I've done. I've made it so that you can pull up a list of charts that you want to buy, a list of projects where you need to buy fabric, and a list of projects where you need to buy floss, so that you can, if you decide that you need to buy some supplies for something, all you have to do is pull up those lists, and then you can decide what supplies you want to buy, for example. And I really like that feature. I just barely started using that. So as I said, when I get to a point where I think that things are stable with everything that I've added and everything seems to be working okay, I will probably share this spreadsheet with you. That will be definitely sometime in the next year. So anyway, that's all that I have to share with you today. If you want to, you can follow my daily progress on Instagram. I post a daily picture showing what I've been able to stitch that day, and you can follow my progress there. I am at blitstitch on Instagram. Thank you for watching this video. Please feel free to like this video if you've enjoyed it. And if you haven't, feel free to subscribe to my channel. That way you can get notifications when I post new videos more regularly. And also, I am always glad to hear from you, and would be glad to answer any questions that you have for me. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you have a great week and a great month, and that that everything goes well for you. Thank you. We will talk to you later. Goodbye.